breaking the chains of cliché. Why? Trapped with a monster. Mrs. Lamarck's science fiction has long been a playground for exploring the depths of human resilience, morality, and unexpected alliances. However, trapped with a monster. The 14-year-old enslaved girl, no one expected to help, leans into a problematic and overused trope that risks diminishing the complexities of real oppression, trauma, and agency. At first glance, the premise seems compelling: an enslaved girl encountering a monstrous entity and forming an alliance that no one saw coming. It suggests suspense, moral dilemmas, and an underdog rising in the face of adversity. However, beneath the surface, the title alone raises critical concerns about the portrayal of power dynamics, the glorification of suffering as a narrative tool, and the potential romanticization of an enslaved child's relationship with a dangerous force. The issue of agency and the survivor-savior. Trope 2, often in speculative fiction, enslaved or oppressed characters are used as vehicles for someone else's redemption. The title's emphasis on the girl's unexpected decision to help the so-called monster suggests a troubling dynamic. Does she help out of genuine choice, or is it another iteration of the Stockholm Syndrome narrative disguised as a sci-fi thriller? Enslaved characters, especially young girls, should not be relegated to passive roles where their suffering is merely a stepping stone for a greater, external force. If the story centers on her making a choice, it should be about reclaiming her own power, not about aiding an entity that might, in many ways, be an extension of her oppressors. The danger of glorifying trauma as a plot device. The idea of a 14-year-old enslaved protagonist is already steeped in tragedy. But when the story positions her in an unexpected alliance with a supposed monster, it risks reducing her trauma to a simple narrative twist. The real horrors of slavery, whether in historical or futuristic settings, should not be used as mere background flavoring to make a sci-fi plot more compelling. Does the story address her enslavement as a systemic issue, or is it merely a tool to heighten the stakes? Without thoughtful handling, such a premise can easily trivialize the realities of oppression and turn suffering into spectacle rather than meaningful commentary. Who is the real monster? And does the story care? The word monster in speculative fiction often carries layers of meaning. Is this creature a literal beast, a misunderstood alien, or a metaphor for oppressive forces? A more interesting and progressive take would involve flipping expectations. Perhaps the monster isn't the alien in the trap, but the system that enslaved the girl in the first place. However, if the story follows a predictable route, where the enslaved girl aids the monster simply because she sees kindness in it, the narrative loses a crucial opportunity to interrogate the true nature of monstrosity. Instead, it risks reinforcing a tired narrative that young, oppressed individuals must show compassion to their captors even when they receive none in return. The problem of unexpected help. The phrase, "no one expected to help," suggests that the girl's decision to aid the monster is surprising. But why? Because of her age? Her status as enslaved? This phrasing subtly implies that oppressed individuals are not seen as capable of making complex moral decisions, reinforcing harmful assumptions about victimhood. In reality, history is filled with enslaved and oppressed people navigating their circumstances in ways that defy expectation, not just for the sake of survival, but for resistance and self-determination. If the story fails to explore why her choice is significant beyond shock value, it risks reducing her to a mere plot device rather than a fully realized character. Conclusion. Rewriting the narrative, a more compelling version of this story would shift the focus away from the shock of the girl's actions, and instead delve into her motivations, agency, and survival instincts. Perhaps she isn't just helping the creature. Perhaps she's using it to secure her own escape, to dismantle the oppressive forces around her, or to forge an alliance that reshapes the world she inhabits. Science fiction thrives on subverting expectations, not reinforcing them. Instead of yet another story where a vulnerable child aids a powerful being out of blind compassion, why not tell a story where the enslaved girl isn't just a helper, but the architect of her own liberation? Now, that's a story worth telling. Science fiction, at its best, is a genre of imagination, exploration, and subversion. It allows us to question power structures, rethink morality, and craft worlds where the oppressed can rise against their circumstances in profound and unexpected ways. However, not every sci-fi story succeeds in delivering a meaningful or responsible narrative. Some, instead, fall into the trap of regurgitating harmful tropes without truly interrogating them. One such example is the premise behind Trapped with a monster, the 14-year-old enslaved girl. No one expected to help. At first glance, the title suggests a gripping, high-stakes scenario, one where a young girl, bound in chains, makes an unlikely decision to aid a creature that others fear. The story promises tension, mystery, and perhaps even a subversion of expectations. Yet, beneath this intriguing exterior lies a troubling undercurrent of overused storytelling devices that can diminish the impact of the tale rather than elevate it. The premise carries significant risks, glorifying trauma, reducing the girl's agency, and romanticizing the dynamics between captors and the enslaved. Without careful execution, this story could reinforce problematic narratives that science fiction should be challenging, not perpetuating. The problem with the survivor-savior. Trope one of the most immediate concerns is the suggestion that the girl's role is to help the creature, an act described as something no one expected. This framing places her in the position of an unexpected savior, a role that has been assigned to vulnerable characters far too often in literature and film. In many stories featuring oppression, particularly those with young female protagonists, the enslaved or abused character is often reduced to a symbol of kindness and resilience, whose purpose is not necessarily to liberate herself, but to change someone or something else. This is often seen in narratives where victims of oppression show remarkable empathy toward their captors or other powerful beings, as if their suffering has given them some kind of divine wisdom or moral superiority. But why should the burden of compassion fall on the shoulders of the oppressed? Why must a 14-year-old enslaved girl's defining trait be that she is willing to aid a monstrous entity rather than seek her own freedom? This not only strips the character of her agency, but it also risks glorifying a harmful message, that the suffering of the vulnerable is meaningful only if it serves someone else's development or redemption. Trauma as a plot device. A dangerous trend. The use of slavery in speculative fiction is not inherently problematic. After all, science, fiction, and fantasy often serve as mirrors for real-world atrocities, forcing audiences to confront difficult truths. However, the way slavery is handled in a story is crucial. If a character's enslavement exists purely as a narrative backdrop to make their struggles seem more dramatic, the story veers into exploitation rather than exploration. A significant issue with this premise is that it appears to use the young girl's enslavement as a convenient way to heighten tension and make her alliance with the monster more shocking. But does the story truly reckon with the horrors of slavery? Does it explore the systems that allow such oppression to exist? Or is her enslavement merely a setting, a shallow plot device used to evoke sympathy without engaging in a deeper critique? 2. Often, stories that feature enslaved characters fail to address the broader implications of their suffering. If the girl's servitude is just a footnote in a larger adventure, it trivializes the real weight of what such an existence means. Her trauma should not be a shortcut to making the story darker or grittier. It should be examined with nuance and care. Who is the real monster? A missed opportunity. The title implies a stark division, a monster trapped and feared, and a girl who no one expects to take its side. But what if the real horror isn't the creature in the trap, but the world that has forced a child into bondage? A truly thought-provoking story wouldn't just explore an alliance between an enslaved girl and an unknown entity. It would question why the girl was enslaved in the first place, who the real oppressors are, and whether the monster is truly more dangerous than the system that imprisons both of them. Too often, science fiction leans into simplistic narratives of good versus evil, without unpacking the deeper truths hidden within the world building. Instead of a straightforward tale where a girl defies expectations by showing kindness, the story could become something far more powerful. What if the girl recognizes that the monster in the trap is a victim just like she is? What if she doesn't help it out of blind compassion, but because she sees it as a means of dismantling her oppressors? What if, rather than being a passive helper, she is the one who ultimately turns the monster against those who enslaved her? By shifting the focus away from a generic, unexpected alliance and toward a deeper commentary on systemic oppression, the story could move beyond cliché into something truly revolutionary. The danger of unexpected help as a gimmick. One of the most telling phrases in the title is, "No one expected to help." But why would no one expect this? Is it because of her age? Her status? The assumption that an enslaved person has no agency. The very idea that her decision is shocking reveals a failure to understand the resilience and strategic intelligence of oppressed people throughout history. Enslaved individuals have always found ways to resist, whether through rebellion, sabotage, or subtle acts of defiance. To frame the girl's actions as surprising suggests an underestimation of her will and resourcefulness. If the story does not acknowledge this, it runs the risk of perpetuating the harmful idea that enslaved people are passive, rather than active, agents in their own destinies. A better story. Reclaiming the narrative, instead of yet another tale where an enslaved child's greatest virtue is her ability to empathize with something dangerous, why not tell a story where she is the mastermind of her own fate? Imagine a version of this narrative where the girl is not just helping the monster, but manipulating the situation to her advantage. The monster is not a misunderstood creature, but a force that can be wielded against her captors. Her story does not revolve around being a side character in the monster's journey, but taking control of her own destiny. Science fiction has limitless potential, but it must be wielded responsibly. A story like this should not reinforce tired tropes about the nobility of suffering or the surprise of a victim taking action. It should challenge these ideas, forcing the audience to reconsider their assumptions about power, freedom, and what it truly means to be a monster. Instead of Trapped with a Monster, perhaps the story should be called The Monster They Created, because in the end, the real horror may not be the creature in the trap, but the society that would enslave a child in the first place. Now that is a sci-fi story worth telling.